views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Phi Labs or the Archway Protocol. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Archin podcast. I am joined with my co-host, Max McKendry, aka Crypto Ken.
Hey, happy to be back.
Up first, we have Osmosis MEV proposal, Prop 421, that recently passed regarding how Osmosis should handle the income generated by the Proto-Rev module.
Yeah, so this module is essentially going to capture MEV in the block space. So a lot of times we hear about MEV, and it's essentially just arbitraging that block to basically gain an advantage and accrue some value. So Osmosis is actually planning their V15 upgrade to implement this. And they're going to have the actual MEV profits accrue in a contract that's going to be controlled by a multi-sig of 5 contributors. And so that what they're really asking is that they allow this contract to really accrue value over the next 4 months before they go and deploy the capital, mainly so it has like a meaningful impact on the actual protocol, but also so the community has time to really digest, what the scale of this revenue will be and really how they should use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this revenue will be used to help fund the protocol, which is great, but it is value that is extracted from users. So that's always one of the caveats and downsides to MEV.
Yep.
Up next, we have Axelar increasing its minimum proposal spend following last week's Stride incident where there were a bunch of spam proposals, and they also had to increase their minimum proposal spend. So It's good to see that people are, learning from other people's experience.
Yeah, and it's a best practice just to have some sort of barrier to submitting a proposal. Even something as small as adding a small deposit fee is enough to deter most bad actors. So yeah, definitely a step in the right direction, and I think it's something we'll see across all new protocols in the Cosmos. Yeah,
absolutely. So right now we also have Wyndex requesting 166K Juno from the community pool, and 135K Wind tokens to be added to the Juno and Wind pool as protocol-owned liquidity.
Yep, and this is it makes sense for both parties, I think. So one thing they made very clear is that this isn't a spend for Juno; it's just a reallocation of the liquidity they already have. So they're taking some basic liquidity out of the community pool from Juno, and they're allowing the Wind DAO to utilize it to pair against their Wind token. This will actually benefit Juno quite a bit. So they are able to capture all these staking rewards from the Wind DAO, and they'll be able to use that in any way they see fit. So the community will really have the authority to, sell it, swap it, utilize it in other ways. But yeah, it's good for Juno. And then at the end of the day, whenever the two parties decide to split, or even one side decides that the relationship shouldn't go on any further, they can always end it. And then at that point, the assets for Juno and Wind DAO would be redistributed back to their respective protocols. So overall, seems like a pretty symbiotic relationship. If Wind DAO wants users, they need liquidity. And if Juno wants developers and users, they need to have things like DEXs. So it makes a lot of sense for both sides, and I expect it to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently it is passing, and the voting period closes on the 14th. So if you haven't voted on that, go vote. Up next, Secret Foundation is restructuring their foundation. So unfortunately, the Secret Foundation previously was a for-profit entity, and now they're trying to make it so that it is a non-profit entity.
Yeah, and a lot of it really just has to do with accountability, but really transparency. When you're a private business, you don't really have as strict standards to provide transparency into your business. In fact, most businesses prefer not to have anyone who doesn't need to see their internal financials see them. So this is causing a lot of unrest in the secret community. A lot of people are under the impression that the Secret Foundation was a not-for-profit entity, and that would, basically have this fiduciary duty to act on behalf of the protocol. But a lot of people are now finding out that's not really the case. They're actually a for-profit business who have no real obligation to the community, although I will say that they have been dedicated to the community over time. So it's not like they've, just taken their allocation and run or anything like that, but certainly think some more transparency is much needed. And by passing this prop, it would really force them to convert to a not-for-profit and basically have to transfer all the assets to it, which would give everybody a lot more clarity and really just transparency into, what funds are being used for and what they have on their balance sheet currently, which is kind of a mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the goals of this proposal 129 is to establish a transparent operation to make sure that people's compensation and benefits are not affected by the transition, and to appoint a non-affiliated trusted third party to oversee transaction processes and offer timeline and transparency.
Yeah, it's really honorable to do that with the making sure that the people who are involved with the foundation currently aren't impacted by this decision. As much as I'd love to see everything go to a more transparent, not for profit entity structure, I wouldn't want to do it necessarily at the expense of all the people who currently are relying on the Secret Foundation for their everyday expenses and just really to be able to put food on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And then touching up on last week's proposals that we discussed, the Atom Accelerator DAO is still in its voting period, but it's as good as passed. Voting closes on the 10th.
Good.
Up
I'd
next.
love to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So up next in the Cosmos, the EVMOS 2023 roadmap is out. So they're planning on activating interchain accounts, which will allow for liquid staking support via the liquid staking zones currently out in the Cosmos. They'll be implementing Kepler ERC20 support, as well as finally launching their dApp store.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of stuff on that roadmap. If anyone's seen the actual visual they put out, you'll see there's probably anywhere from 15 to 20 initiatives they have, ranging from Q1 to obviously Q3 or Q4 of 2023. It's a large endeavor. I would love to say that they're going to be able to knock them all out, and hopefully they do. But like I said, it's a space where you get a lot of promises, but not necessarily always delivering. And I'm not going to put that on EVMOS at all specifically. But just whenever you see a really long, large roadmap like this, you start to question, how feasible it really is. But the things they included are all things I think are necessary to have a really thriving ecosystem that EVMOS is trying to create.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully some of those more prominent and more expected items in the roadmap in the EVMOS manifesto will come to light. And we'll make sure to link that post for you below in the description. So up next, Gnoland's Game of Chains has launched. So yesterday or the day before saw the first dev office hours, teaching programmers how to program on Gnoland. The prize pool is a whopping 133K Atom. And the competition states that it's to win tiered membership of the chain through a series of tasks. But I'm not really sure what they mean by tiered membership.
Nor do I. That actually kind of threw me for a loop as well. So definitely something I'm going to try to read more on and try to get a better understanding of what exactly they mean by that. But to your point, the prize pool is 133K Atom. I think last I just saw Atom was around $15. So it's roughly $2 million in prizes. So that's some pretty heavy incentive. So it's going to be interesting to see, what type of people show up and try to participate for that, because that's a lot of cash on the table.
Definitely. And up next, Skip and Injective are integrating to make Injective MEV resistant. So basically, Skip allows Injective to give back users some of that MEV value that is captured. Do you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, I do. I've seen this deployed. I think Juno had it deployed as well, and now Injective is adding it. And what it's trying to do is similar to like Osmosis. They know that there's this extracted value that's inherently coming from the blocks that people are taking advantage of. So what they're trying to do is kind of commoditize it for either the stakers specifically or for the actual protocol. In Osmosis' case, all the rewards or I guess extracted value would go back to the protocol. For Injective and Skip specifically, they actually give it back to the validators in addition to the stakers. And then I believe they also call them searchers, which are users who actually go out and find these opportunities or participate in the arbitrage. So they will also receive a portion of that MEV that's extracted. So kind of like we mentioned earlier, MEV, some people will say it's good MEV, some will say bad. I think at the end of the day, you're still extracting value, but at least if you're going to do so, it's better off if it's either redistributed to the users / stakers or put back into the protocol to be reallocated in other ways.
On another note, Mars Hub, the credit protocol, went live with 16 Genesis validators and a total of 50 possible total active validators.
Yeah, so this is a really cool use case of the outpost structure where you have a layer one that you build out that really does, or I guess an app chain that kind of does, one specific thing, but then can be utilized by other, generalized layer ones to basically take advantage of what you've already built. And I think this is going to be very useful for the entire ecosystem. I know lending's a big feature people are looking for. From the validator perspective, I get why they started with such a small set. It's actually, somewhat common to start off the Genesis with a more centralized group of validators to one, make it easier to coordinate, easier to get to consensus. And then once you've confirmed that you're kind of producing blocks and the blockchain stable, then you kind of expand out that set. So far, that's what they've done. So we're up to, I think, 50 validators are in the current set. But the problem is the main validators, I think the 16 you mentioned, received a bulk, if not, all of the Genesis distributions from the Mars protocol. So I'm hoping that those delegations are spread out to some of the smaller validators in the set, especially those who bootstrap their way in. It's just kind of a centralized entity right now with how much voting power is sitting at the top due to those delegations.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe you tweeted out a graph showing the distribution of the tokens across the different validators. So we'll make sure to link that below as well.
Yep.
Just so you guys can check that out. Up next, we have Kava announcing its Kava vaults. So essentially, the Kava vaults are a decentralized reserve controlled by Kava stakers, meant to fuel growth on Kava. So these Kava vaults currently hold 182 million Kava, which at the current price is equivalent to about $180. I mean, $182 million. And so, yeah, $180 would be kind of sad now.
Yeah, I don't know if that'd get the job done, but the 182 million might. And honestly, that's an impressive treasury to be kind of allocating out. I like the idea of the vault. They're gonna basically use governance to deploy it in whatever way they see fit. I know me and you kind of talked, off the record of how much different is this from a standard kind of community pool. We're not exactly sure, so interested to learn more about this whole vault process and how it kind of is different from standard governance voting. But either way, happy to see chains taking the liquidity they have and actually deploying it for the betterment of the protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. They state on the website that it's using DAO technology to make this community pool or this vault possible. So yeah, would love to learn more about how that differs from our current community pool structures in most chains. Up next, we have Osmosis Core 3 pools live, which is Osmosis's brand new stable swap. So currently, the pool out is BUSD, USDC, and USDT. So stable swaps are usually they've been viewed traditionally as a DeFi savings account because it has a lower risk of impermanent loss. It's a reliable kind of gives you a modest yield on deposits. And yeah, so we're happy to see that one live, and I wonder what's next.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have more options when it comes to getting any sort of stable coin in the Cosmos. And obviously, the less slippage we have, the better. So hopefully this gets a lot of traction and a lot of liquidity, and we'll have at least one spot to go where we can count on, large transactions for stables that are able to be done without much slippage.
Absolutely. And a quick congratulations to Axelar for being listed on Coinbase, which just happened, I believe, a few hours ago. So congrats to the whole Axelar team.
We also want to give a quick shout out to Stride and Luna. We see they teamed up to make their own liquid staking pair that is going to be going live on Demex. So going to be interesting to see the Stride gang expanding their reach into some dexes that I haven't really been utilized or I haven't utilized quite yet, but we'll be interested to check out, especially now that the Cosmos is getting a little more representation.
Yeah, absolutely. And now going into outside the Cosmos. So the FBI recently seized an NFT, specifically a Bored Ape, from an infamous crypto scammer that goes by the name Horror.
So I'm not familiar with who this person is specifically, but I do remember over the past year or more how many times I've seen large holders of NFTs, whether it be Bored Ape or punks or what have you, get scammed via Discord. There's been countless times. So it's nice to see that they're actually able to track some of these down and actually get it back. Obviously, the value of these now are probably quite a bit lower than they were when they were taken. But to that point, I guess it doesn't really matter. At least the assets are being returned to the owners. And hopefully we can track down a lot more of these scammers. Because as I said, there's been a litany of different scams that have happened over the last year, especially in the NFT space.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was actually found out by sort of like the Robin Hood of the crypto space and Twitter and stuff. So I can't remember his name, but he was actually able to track this down and gave the information to the FBI so that they could seize these assets. Horror was also a part of a multi-million-dollar crypto scheme that infiltrated over 600 Discord servers and 12 Twitter accounts to steal crypto over the last year.
Quite the operation.
Yeah. Thanks to our mysterious Robin Hood. Up next, Sberbank is launching a DEX. For those of you that don't know, Sberbank is one of Russia's biggest banks, and they plan to have this DEX fully open to Russian citizens by the end of April.
Yeah, so very interesting for a couple of reasons. One, this bank is majority owned by the actual government, so they actually have controlling interest in this bank. There's no regulation currently in Russia with cryptocurrency, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they regulate their largest bank, who's going to now be issuing potential cryptocurrency. And really, it just seems like an odd match. They said they're going to support Ethereum, including MetaMask, so they're trying to appeal to like the broader audience. Call me a skeptic, but I just don't feel like this is done in good faith. I feel like there's some possible nefarious purposes behind this, but I guess we will wait and see. I know as a US citizen, I'm unable to participate in any sort of exchange that's located in Russia anyway. So I probably will not be impacted by this directly, but it will give the Russian government some exposure to the overall crypto space in a much broader fashion. And that to me can be considered somewhat of a risk.
Another bit of somewhat worrying, somewhat skeptical news is that GTX apparently is now fully funded, according to a rumor on Twitter. So for those of you that are not familiar, GTX was looking to raise $25 million in January.
Yeah, and for those who are unfamiliar with GTX, the founders are actually two of the 3AC or the Three Arrows Capital founders. And they were part of that whole contagion and blow up that was, kind of along the lines of FTX. I think at one point they were a $10 billion fund, and now currently are sitting in bankruptcy. So it's interesting to see their two founders continuing to raise and just basically build out a new protocol. It's concerning to your point that we have such short memories in the space. These are people who financially impacted a lot of people negatively, seem to have no remorse for that. And in fact, it basically just, got right back up and tried to do it all over again. So this is something that kind of plagues the space. We just kind of forget who the bad actors are and let them continue to run the same thing over and over. And it's something I really hope we get away from. But yeah, this is just another one of those stories where you shake your head and say, I don't know what people are thinking.
And that's it for this week's crypto news. Thank you so much, Max, and I hope to see you all next week.
Yeah, excited to be on here more often and continue to give the news to the cosmos.
Bye.